anytime Marvel Studios produces something really, really good, I always got to bring this little hat out because, yeah, that was some good shit right there. X-Men 97 recently wrapped up, and so of course I watched it, so let's review. X-Men 97 is more so a continuation of the original cartoon that ran in the 90s for 6 seasons. It takes place really directly after that series finale in which Professor X is seemingly dead, the X-Men are trying to figure out how to go on without him, and they still have to deal with the world not being fully accepting of mutants, and the people that try to eradicate them out of fear. Now, of course, I'm a huge X-Men fan. Like the X-Men, of course, everybody knows the X-Men. There's like a few mascots that people think of when they think of the Marvel brand, and that's Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk, and the X-Men, and more specifically, Wolverine. And that's basically my experience with them too. Of course, I've watched the 90s cartoon, but I'll admit, I never really watched it all the way through. I've watched certain plot lines already there, but as far as X-Men cartoons goes, I was always more on the X-Men Evolution train that ran on the Kids WB. But I've always had a soft spot in my heart for that original 90s cartoon because it is up there with Batman the Animated Series, and a lot of people would agree. And so when Marvel announced that they were going to bring back this show and call it X-Men 97, I was excited but a bit curious because this could be just a nostalgia fest or it could be something that actually grew with this audience, and I am here to report that it is definitely the latter because this show really grew with its audience. It maintains the spirit of the original cartoon, but at the same time, it still focuses on the audience that grew up with that show and gives us themes that are relevant today. The animation is updated from the original cartoon. I would say that this show is basically on par with Invincible, but without all the blood and the violence, but I mean that in the way of this show is a cartoon that is for adults. It's appropriate for kids at times, but let's be real, this show really is for the adults that grew up on the original cartoon. And I really do mean that because this show, in a way, does keep in spirit with the original show because it tackles the themes of race, prejudice, terrorism, acceptance. The show is an allegory for a lot of things. And yet, not one point did I ever feel like it was trying to preach to its audience. And let's be real, everybody is getting sick of quote-unquote woke shit in cartoons and movies and shit. And I really hate that word right now because of how overused it has been. But here I can definitely say this show is woke, but in a way that doesn't preach to you. It still focuses on story first, and all the quote-unquote woke themes are there, whether you choose to ignore them or not. But let me tackle this show episode to episode. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I'm just giving you my general thoughts on the different episodes and the characters as a whole and my thoughts on the show as a whole. But episode 1 was really where I thought the show was going to go because I understand that first episode, it has to get you hooked in and get you massaged into the original show. And it did work, and it was fun just seeing all these characters return and seeing how they deal with the death of Professor X and how to move forward. And I already knew what the ending was going to be, which is Magneto coming out saying that Professor X left his last will and testament for everything to Magneto, and now he's left as the leader of the School of Gifted Youngsters. And so that leads us into episode 2, which is now them having to accept that the professor left everything to Magneto for a reason, hoping that this will get to change Magneto and his perspective on things. And to the show's credit, they really do, because Magneto, he really does go for it, and we do see how he does change, and he's actually making an effort to try to see things Professor X's way. But it was really episode 2 where this show really started to take a turn and what had me hooked, because a few things happen in which Magneto, even though he's taking the righteous path, he still has to answer for his crimes. So he goes to the UN and he tries to explain himself and explain that he is trying to be a good person, but then you have a bunch of anti-mutants coming in out of nowhere. It was very reminiscent of January 6, 2021, which is really where the show hooked me. But once they made weapons that neutralizes mutant abilities and they used it on Storm, that's when it was like, oh shit, oh no. And it really was just downright heartbreaking and sad to see Storm break down over losing her powers and have funny at times, because I will say this show does get a little bit melodramatic and soap opera-ish at times, especially right down to the dialogue with Storm. She's just laying there talking about,
the breeze is gone. I cannot feel it, nor the moisture, nor the air. What has he done to me?
the breeze is gone. I can't feel it, nor the moisture, nor the air. What has he done to me? But on a serious note, though, just seeing that, I was just like, oh, honey. So Storm goes away for a while to try to see who she is without her powers, and then she meets Forge, and I'll get to more on that later. Episode 3 is really where the Summers family really starts to break down, because it turns out Jean Grey had a whole twin running around named Madeline, but she was created by Mr. Sinister, which I'll admit. Sinister, he's a villain that I'm less familiar with, but from what I understand is he's been around for a long time because he's been taking mutant abilities and mutant DNA and just been fusing them inside him, but he got his hands on Jean Grey somewhere in the Dark Phoenix saga in the original cartoon, and they infected their baby, and now the baby has to go into the future. But the fact that Cyclops had a whole baby with a whole other version of Jean, and so now he doesn't even know what his relationship with the original Jean is going to be like. Then the next episode is basically split into 2 parts, in which the first half of the episode is about Jubilee, and it's her 18th birthday, and I do like how this episode was in a way kind of speaking to the fans, because with Jubilee, she's turning 18, and now she's got to leave childish things behind, and not necessarily though, but at the same time, she basically, the whole point of the episode was just her realizing that nostalgia is fun and all, but at the same time, real living is just being a part of the world, and change can be scary at times. And I feel like that episode was talking to us, the fans, because we're all wrapped up in the past and nostalgia, but they're just trying to tell us, like, hey, it's okay to revisit the past, but at the end of the day, we got to go into the future, and change can be scary at times, but it's what makes life meaningful. And then the second half of that episode, it focuses on Storm. She's with Forge trying to figure out how to get her powers back, or at least trying to live without her powers, and then this evil entity is taking over her. Then the next episode, which is really where the show started to take a turn, because Genosha is realized. It's basically a dystopia for mutants, but then these evil sentinels come out of nowhere. They destroy Genosha, lives are taken, including Gambit's. And Rogue is just downright heartbroken, and Magneto, he, like I said earlier, he really is trying to take the righteous path, but what happened in this episode basically just reaffirms everything Magneto has always believed. And they put more emphasis on the triangle between Magneto, Rogue, and Gambit this episode, which made it even more downright heartbreaking. Then the next episode is basically part 2 of the second part of the episode before last. But it focuses on Storm. She does get her powers back and is more powerful than ever. But on the background of that episode, we see that Professor X, he's with the Shi'ar Empire. He is alive and well, and he's trying to bring peace up there. But then he realizes that there's a whole lot of stuff going on down on Earth, and he has to go back. Episode 7 is basically the fallout of the death of Gambit, and everybody is dealing with it in their own way, including Rogue, who goes on this revenge path. She is grief-stricken, and she almost kills Trask, but then luckily he comes back, and there is a whole plot with Bastion. And then those last 3 episodes, I just put them all together because it's basically a 3-part episode called Tolerance is Extinction, in which Bastion, he's basically turning humans into sentinels. They're becoming real killing machines. They're going after all mutants, including the X-Men. Professor X comes back and he reunites all the X-Men together, including Cable, who comes back to help them. And we get some fun little family stuff between Cable and Jean Grey and Cyclops. We get to see Cyclops become a dad. And it's even nice, Magneto got captured, but then he escapes through the help of one of the senator ladies, whatever her name is, I forgot. But then once he does get out, he basically becomes a whole human EMP and knocks out the world's electricity. And after what happened on Janelle's show, Magneto basically became like Franklin at the end of season 5 of Snowfall.
I showed them compassion. I showed them mercy. I walked away. I was the bigger man. And look where the fuck it got me.
And so Magneto rages war, and some X-Men join him, but the X-Men, again, they come together to try to stop Magneto. There's a whole battle of the mind between Professor X and Magneto going on, and this is really where Professor X hopefully truly got to Magneto, because Magneto, he's just held on by the trauma of everything he went through during the Holocaust and how that affected his mindset and how he deals with the whole mutant thing. Magneto does help save the day, and they finally take care of both Bastion and Sinister. We get to see Sinister be old, but all the X-Men, somehow they get transported to different timelines, and that sets up season 2. Overall, I just love what the show did because of how elevated the story was, and like I said, it grew up with its audience and tackled themes that we can all understand now more than ever. And of course, the character development is where the show shines, especially between Professor X and Magneto. But Magneto, like I said, he really tried to take the righteous path, but then the human race, they just kept giving him every reason to just doubt them. Even to the point where Magneto, he's just had enough, and he's even getting tired of Professor X BS, to the point where he even says one of my favorite uses of the word shut up. And that's a testament to how much everybody's starting to question Professor X right now, because it's like, is peace really achievable? Because we're trying to do it your way, but then fuck shit just keeps happening. And it's one of the reasons why I love the X-Men so much, because Professor X and Magneto, they're essentially Martin and Malcolm. And this show really does grow with everyone's mindset on that as we get older, because let's be real, and this is something I heard recently, but it's like, as kids, we learn to idolize Malcolm, but as we get older, we realize Malcolm was right. And I feel like that's where my mindset is with the friendship between Professor X and Magneto, because of course we idolize Professor X, but as we get older, we kind of realize Magneto was right, and this show really does put some emphasis on it, even right down to them saying Magneto was right, because after this show, I am kind of on that train, like, Magneto does have a point, though, because tolerance would be nice, but at the same time, tolerance does scare people, and it kind of plays onto how people are just afraid of being replaced and the future is just leaving them behind. Now, I'll admit, Cyclops, he's never been my favorite X-Men, but that's just me. I just never liked Boy Scout characters, and the movies definitely didn't do that character justice, but here they definitely make up for it, because he definitely goes through a lot between losing his wife, or having a different version of his wife. He has to lose his son, and he has to comes to terms with not being like his own dad who left him. He's having a mental, emotional affair with the clone of Jean. I'll say the two characters that did kind of get sidelined was Wolverine and Beast. Beast more than anyone, but Wolverine I can kind of understand, because the movies, they already put too much emphasis on Wolverine to begin with. But they definitely made up for it, because when Magneto took all the adamantium off of Wolverine's bones and the way they left him, like, how are they going to solve this? What are they going to do? What is Logan going to do? And I even like how they address the love triangle between him and Scott and Jean. And when Wolverine, he is sitting on the bed, Cyclops, he whisperly tells him, like, come on, don't let her down. When that moment happened, I was like, character development. Gambit, I'll admit, he's never really been a favorite of mine, but what they did with him on this show and how that affected Rogue, that definitely set her off. She almost went full villain, and she is grief-stricken, and I even like how they brought her brother on the show, Nightcrawler, and I love how this show is realizing how cool of a character Nightcrawler is, and I hope they continue that. I do love how they put emphasis on the sisterhood between Storm and Jean Grey, even right down to this line. And really, the show as a whole really did have a lot of sobering quotes, like this particular quote I hear from Magneto.
Most other nations don't allow a terrorist to be their leader.
Yet so many allow their leaders to be terrorists.
And lastly, I also love how this show has nods and Easter eggs to the greater animated Marvel Universe, because you get cameos from both Captain America, Iron Man, the Spider-Man animated show, Black Panther, which I didn't expect, and I didn't even know that he made an appearance on the original cartoon, Doctor Doom. Hell, there's even a cameo from The Watcher, which further connects this show to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This show has a lot going for it, to the point where I couldn't review this show objectively, because I was just loving everything this show had to offer. Like, I have not been excited for a new episode of a show every week in a long time, and now I really can't wait for season 2 whenever that happens. And shout out to Bo DeBio, who is the creator of this show, but he recently got fired, and while it's up in the air as to the reason why he got fired, but I just can't see this show being as great as this first season right here without him at the helm, and I really hope Disney reconsiders. It's probably the best piece of X-Men content that we have gotten in a long time. I'm gonna give X-Men 97 the hands up emoji, because it is a masterpiece.